Hi, I'm Richard McSpadden with AOPA and the Air Safety Institute. I am delighted tonight to bring you this webinar on flying the backcountry risks and rewards, and really excited about the two people that are going to help deliver this webinar and talk to you tonight, Mark Patey and Todd Christensen. We got a lot to cover, so let's get right into it. We've had a couple webinars before, and the feedback has been great. Give us more and give us more specifics. So that's what we're going to try to do tonight. So thanks for joining us. As I mentioned, the people that are going to join us tonight, Mark Patey, you're probably familiar with him through Best Aviation Products and the Best Tugs. You may not know he's got 10,000 hours of general aviation flying. He flies all kinds of aircraft, and he flies all kinds of aircraft into the backcountry. A lot of experience back there, and he and his brother not only do a lot of flying in general in GA, they do a lot of backcountry flying, and so I'm excited to hear from Mark about some of the techniques he'll talk about tonight. And then really excited to have Todd Christensen here. Todd Christensen has got over 5,000 hours of flying GA. He's got some time doing aerial application kind of work. And he's rotary qualified as well, and he's done a lot of backcountry flying. He comes out of Alaska. He's done some STOL flying and STOL competitions there, and he's Aviat's Alaska representative. So just delighted to have Todd with us tonight as well. So without any more, Mark and Todd, thanks for joining us.
Good to be here.
Thanks for having us.
All right. So let's start out with a survey. So I'm going to ask my colleagues help John Collins here, who runs the Air Safety Institute, our EFERC, FERC programs, our seminar, webinar programs. So John, let's open this poll and see who we have in attendance tonight, kind of what their experience level is. So the first question there, what's your general experience flying GA?
Like we've got a lot of folks with more than 1,000 hours, so that's good.
Okay, so fair amount of people with 1,000 hours or more, so that's good stuff. About what percentage are we looking at, John?
About 50% of who voted so far. We got about 70% who have voted. So we're going to keep this open just a few more seconds. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and close the voting.
Okay.
And share the results.
Yeah, let's see what it looks like. What kind of experience, general aviation experience do we have out there? I can't see the results on my screen, John. So
okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
50% of our attendees, which right now about 387 total, so about 175, 180 somewhere in there, maybe more. More than 1,000 hours, and
okay.
Then it's split evenly between less than 250 hours and
okay.
less than 750.
All right, so about a quarter of the audience or so, less than 250, and then over half with 1,000 hours. So okay, good. What's our next question? Is what's your backcountry experience? So all the way from none to a little bit to kind of moderate and then to heavy. So let's see what we get there. So while you're doing the survey, I just want to thank Aviat for being our sponsor, not only for this webinar, but for a lot of the backcountry work that the Air Safety Institute does. Aviat's been a great partner with us in sponsoring this and some of the other work that we're doing. So thanks to Aviat.
Yes, and Richard, we, by way of Stu Horn and Steve Anderson, thank you for letting us be part of it. We're delighted to. It's such a great avenue for us to showcase our airplanes, but also be involved in general aviation and especially the safety. So thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Todd. All right, John, what do we got? What are we looking at in terms of backcountry experience?
Backcountry experience, we're looking at the greater majority, 36% have none. So thanks for joining us. Another 30% have light experience, and then 24% with moderate, and heavy experience, 10%.
10%, okay. Well, that's good to know. So about 60% of our audience or more have light to no backcountry experience, and obviously are joining because they want to learn a little bit more about it, see if it's for them, which is great. And they've taken the first step. So if you're kind of new to backcountry flying, I want to congratulate you, because really the first thing you should do is some study and some research and talk to some people, and because this is a very challenging environment back here. A lot of fun, a lot of excitement, things you can't experience anywhere else, but it can be challenging. So with that, what final question is, what are your plans for the backcountry this year? So no interest in flying backcountry yourself, you just want to hear you like hearing about the stories and what it's about, to you plan to try a little bit of it, to you're definitely going in the backcountry.
As the numbers start to climb, we're seeing 55% or more that are definitely going. We have a few that are not going to go, at least not this year, and about 43% are toying with.
Yeah. Okay, so good. So over half definitely going, and so that's great. So in summary, Todd and Mark, it looks like we've got kind of the spectrum. We have a lot of people who haven't been at all, or have only been very lightly, and a fair amount of those people plan to go in the backcountry. So this is the right venue for them, I think.
Good group.
Okay.
Mark and I need to vote, but we're definitely in.
Yeah, that's right. So here's what we'll talk about, and I want to get right into it. We're going to talk a little bit about preparing you and your aircraft for the backcountry. There's a lot of good material out this. So in our practice last night, we decided we don't want to linger on this too long. I'm really anxious to hear myself, to really experienced backcountry guys talk about the skills that they work on and how they practice. So that's going to be the meat of tonight's discussion. So we'll get right into that. And then, as always, we're going to end with each of us giving some of our fun places to fly in the backcountry. So let's talk a little bit about just preparing your airplane. And just as a general mindset, it's good to realize when you go in the backcountry, you really need to figure you're going to be self-sufficient. And help is usually a long way away from some of the most spectacular places. So I'm going to take a minute to pitch this book from my friend and colleagues, Dick Williams and Amy Hoover. They wrote this book on mountain canyon and backcountry flying. It's a great book. You can get it from ASA, and it's on sale at a lot of the fly-ins that you'll go to. But it'll give you a lot of more depth on some of the things we're going to hit on. But make sure your airplane is topped off, like whatever oil level that you run, make sure it's at the max there, and fuel and pressure on your tires, hydraulics. If you have those old bladder type brakes I used to have in my Super Cub, those things can leak a little hydraulic fluid. Top all that stuff off and just realize, help is a long way away. And you really don't want to take an airplane in the backcountry that has nagging issues, like if it has trouble starting or hot starting, or you're having a few mag issues here and there. I don't recommend you take that into the backcountry, because there's the likelihood that you get stranded. It's more difficult to get help. And then just keep in mind, if you break in the backcountry, what's your plan? So who are you going to call? Who knows where you're going, and what kind of person do you know that's an A&P that could help you bring equipment to you? So the likelihood that you'll break is low. I don't see a lot of broken airplanes in the backcountry, but it's good to have a plan in mind. Todd and Mark, let me pitch this to you guys. Any thoughts you have on preparing your airplane?
Well, there's two things that come to mind real quick. You talk about, oil pressure, hydraulics, or oil, hydraulics, tire pressure. The first thing that came to mind is in the backcountry, if you're running a tube tire, you like to have low tire pressure for soft landings. You got to know if it's too low, you're going to rip the valve stem off your tube and end up with a flat. That's a really big inconvenience. But if you have like an Alaska bush wheel, you've got a tire that's built to run flat, and you've got to flatten it. You got to let the air out of it before you go, because as Todd can attest, with all of his experience and my experience as well, the guys that get a flat tire are the guys that thought, I'll just leave it pumped up this time. And a pumped up tire is what gets shredded on the sticks and rocks, and a flat tire molds over it. So know that what you're flying, and if you've got a tube tire, don't get too aggressive on going flat. If you got a bush wheel, go really flat. And then of course you got to know how much runway your airplane takes to get airborne at the weight you're flying into the backcountry with 2.5 pounds of pressure in your tires versus 8 pounds of pressure in those bush wheels. It's a very different airplane. The second thing that came to mind was when you're talking about people know where you're going, make sure that if you're going into certain spots in the backcountry, the guys that can actually get into the spot you're going into are available to come get you out. So 90% of the strips we go play in, just about anybody in the bush plane can come and get us, but there's probably 10 to 15% of the strips that we like to go play in that we only have that one friend that didn't come with us that is going to be able to get in to bail us out if we get into trouble. And if he's not with us, it's probably because he couldn't come in to bail us out. And so it really does, we look at that very seriously before we go into some of the deeper, tighter, smaller, more obstacle-ridden strips.
Yeah. Thanks, Todd. Todd, what kind of thoughts do you have?
I love your middle item here, no nagging items. You know, so often we have that fix-it list. You know, we all have a fix-it list. And you go to get in to leave and you're like, oh shoot, I forgot that. You know, and when you're flying backcountry and off airport, you need to have your plane fixed, you know, and that's just our job. We get busy doing other things, but don't overlook that. Take the time. Two other things. One, and Mark talked about it, I think it's so good, but is we love flying with buddies. You know, if you're going to do one thing safe for yourself, fly with a buddy. Go with someone. I mean, you can always tie an airplane down if it breaks, if you wreck it, if something happens to the plane. Leave the plane. You're both home tonight. All is well. Whereas you're out there alone, one, they got to find you. You got to get word where they're at. So go with a friend. You know, and by looking at those numbers, great. I love the poll because it kind of gives us an idea of who we're talking to. But find a mentor. Go with a mentor. If you know, each one of us, Mark had one, I had one, you had one, I'm sure, Richard.
Yep. Have
a mentor that can help. It'll save so many painful experiences and lots of money, and it just makes it so much more enjoyable. And that learning curve goes so much faster when someone's there to help coach you along the way that's been there and done that. Just little things you'd never think of, just like the valve stem. You know, you don't ever think of that. So great points, Mark.
Yeah, good stuff. And I agree with that. I've been both by myself and then with others in the backcountry, and the stress level is a lot higher when you're by yourself, I have to tell you. So going with a buddy back there is great and kind of adds to the fun. So let's take a look. Oops, I'm sorry, I went one too much. So how about tools? So this is a picture of the toolkit that I bring when I come back there, and I'm sure you guys have your own thing, but just the basics. You know, for me, I fly a 93 Super Cub, 150 horsepower. It's pretty stock. Duct tape, zip ties, and some wire, and you know, some basic set of wrenches is really all I need. I've had a couple things back there that you have to tweak or fix, and really just that basic set of tools right there will go a long way when you're operating a relatively simple airplane like a Super Cub. So what do you guys keep anything different or special in your toolkits?
You know, I have a favorite. You know, my brother Mike and I have been doing search and rescue for about 20 years, and there's one thing we've learned about finding people out in the backcountry, whether it's a snowmobile, wrecked ATV, or airplane, is that typically the only thing that you have with you when you leave the scene of the crash is what is on you. And we tend to be adrenaline ridden or injured, and we wander away without maybe the tool bag. So for me, a Leatherman's my favorite thing because it's on my belt. And if something goes wrong, heaven forbid there was a fire or anything else, when I get out of the plane, the most useful tool is with me no matter what. So there's, I think everything in this bag is great. I've got a little bag of the usual essentials, but for me, the personal locator attached to your body and a Leatherman attached to your body is probably the best thing. And you'd be shocked how many people we have get injured in racer crashes and they're in shock and they will wander away from their crash site without their cell phone because it was in the glove box and they're just not with it. So whatever's attached to you is the most important. And then everything else is a bonus.
Good stuff. How about you, Todd? Anything else in your toolkit that you like?
You know, we're going to get to this, but two items for me: inReach and a sat phone. You know, a lot of guys are good fix-its. I think Mark can fix anything. I'm not that guy. You know, I'm going to call you and tell you it's broke and to fix it, you know. And so for me, I want to communicate. And I think if we're gonna, for me, and I've got some tools and I've got those things, but yeah, I need to be able to get a hold of somebody. And this is always with me. And I just, man, I don't leave without those. With the sat phone, yep, same thing, Richard, got your inReach, and it allows you to be in touch. And sometimes that's not emergency. Sometimes it's, hey, honey, we got crappy weather and I'm going to be home in the morning, which is great relief. So no, those are my favorite two items, along with what you guys are saying.
Yeah, what I like about that Garmin inReach is you can sync it with your cell phone, and it's much easier to use, just as if you're texting. And you can suspend your service on it. So, you know, for me, I go in the backcountry in the summer, so I suspend the service with it all winter long, and then I just wake it up in the summer and pay for the service, and you can get various levels of service. But I think it's a great little device. And I'm with you, Mark, on, you know, I learned that when I first started going in the backcountry. I think my friend Mike Vivian told me that, you know, your survival gear is what's on your body. Everything else is, you should consider camping gear, because you don't know if you're going to be able to get to it. So yeah, this vest I wear when I go in the backcountry is just a cheapest vest that Orvis would sell. And the things you guys mentioned into it, and the other things that I like to have in here is I have a little water device. So I kind of think of those 4 R's that you see on the screen there. And this little life straw, I think it is, you can stick into any stream and, you know, filter water. And basically, as you guys are mentioning, it's kind of like, if you had to, you'd be able to survive, you know, until and you'd be able to call for help. So and I find it very practical. But I've also found, when I first got it, I loaded it all up with all kinds of stuff, and it was so heavy and bulky that I never wore it, which was kind of defeating the purpose. So it's a balance of fitting stuff in there and keeping it to where you're light and nimble, and it's not too much of an obstruction to wear it. I wanted to share, so I keep this sleeping bag. I bought this from REI. It's a sleeping bag with a mattress and a pad. And in the back of my this kit, the sleeping bag, two-person sleeping bag, mattress, air mattress, and a sleeping bag, in a tent. And I bought it from REI. The thing only weighs 9 pounds, and I stick it in the back of my extended baggage in my Super Cub. That and this little Spencer aircraft seat. I love these seats because they're not even a pound. And I stick that in the back of my Super Cub, and I keep that back there all the time. And that way, if ever weather's a problem, or I feel like I need to put it down because I don't want to penetrate bad weather or winds or whatever the case, between what I keep in my survival vest and what I've got there in the back of my airplane all the time, I can pitch a tent, sleeping bag, and I'll be fine for a couple of days to wait things out. And I've never had to do that, but it's comforting to have that. So let's move in now to the really exciting part and talk about, you know, so we talked about preparing your airplane, preparing yourself, and there's some stuff on the AOPA, Air Safety Institute website. I'll go into more detail there about the things we just talked about, and also the book that I mentioned from Amy Hoover and Dick Williams. Go there and find more detail and sort of sort out your own items to take with you. But let's now talk about the really exciting stuff here, the skills and proficiency. And I can't wait for this part of it. Todd, I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, kick us off with this and tell us a little bit about the skills and proficiency and what you really need to go fly confidently.
If there's one thing I'm actually excited about, it's this. And the fact is, I'm going to make an analogy. If you're serious about golfing, or even not serious, and I'm not that serious, I'm a crappy golfer. But when I go golfing, you got your golf cart and it says your distance on each club, right? You know, and you've built a little 1 index card cheat sheet that your 9-iron does this for you. And we know. Well, I build that for flying. So when we look at that, how many feet do I need to land? And which I really think, if you ask a lot of folks heading to the backcountry, how many feet do you need to land? Most are going to say, well, I give you some funny number. Well, I need better than that. I want to be exact. I want to look down at a bar and say that's a 300-foot bar. I can land it safely today. Well, the way I do that, and this is actually pretty cool, you build your book, and your book is this. In golf, your club equals a distance. In backcountry flying, off airport flying, your short final approach speed equals distance. So as we go out and practice, It's very simple. Make sure you don't confuse airspeed and ground speed. For this exercise, it's all ground speed. We're using the GPS. We'll talk about the other in just a second when we talk about slow flight with the ASI, the airspeed indicator. But for this exercise, ground speed on short final equals ground roll. So in my airplane, if I'm in my experimental cub and I'm building my book, and I come in and I go out, let's say I go out this morning and it's calm winds, and I come in and my short final, and when I say short final, I mean 100 yards. So I'm 100 yards, I've got the airplane slow, I'm not 1 or 2 miles off of stall, I'm 5, I've got a margin, and there's no wind. And let's say that just for purposes, I get 40. And then I land on a mark. So to do this, you have to have a line. Go to your favorite spot, make sure you have a line, a mark. I land my mark, and I've either got it marked, or I get out and walk it, or I measure it, or I turn sideways and use a GPS or a rangefinder, whatever you got to do to measure. Get your distance. So I know that out of 5 landings this morning, and I was showing 40 on short final, I got 237 feet. And I averaged between, that was my average. Now tonight, maybe that wind kicks up and I go to the same place. And now I got a 7-mile-an-hour headwind, and now my approach speed, instead of being 40, is 32, 33. And what you're going to do, you're going to hit your mark, and you're going to find that now if you can show on short final 32, 33, your ground roll after the mark is 147 feet. Build your book. What that does for us is at any wind, at any conditions, whether we have increased density altitude, whether we have crappy air and I can't get the airplane slow, whether I got a great headwind, or maybe it's a one-way strip and I have to use a tailwind, it allows me to know exactly what I need to land. So if I'm picking a bar that I haven't landed and I come in and I've got 40 on my short final ground speed, my book says I can land that 230 feet. That bar's 400. I got a great margin. With a lot of confidence, I know what I can do.
You know what, Todd, what I love about that is really similar to a couple webinars ago. Mark, you talked about the strategy you use, and you were talking about this with your Pilatus, I think you had in the backcountry. To share with us the technique you use is very similar to what Todd's talking about.
Well, yeah, and I think Todd touched on it, and but I want to drive it home even a little bit more. You're got a line on the ground, or maybe that line on the ground is a rock you're aiming for. Never measure from where your tires touch the ground to where you came to a stop. You got to measure all the way back to the line or the rock or the bush you were aiming for. You got to be honest with yourself because for anybody, where you wanted to hit and where you hit is going to have a delta. Sometimes it's big, sometimes it's small. But yeah, I took the Pilatus out for preparation for the backcountry at 5,000 feet density altitude, and went out and just did a whole bunch of short field landings, full 40 flaps. The Pilatus usually only used 30, and we had the lights at the end of the runway at our airport stick up about 1.5 feet, and we were measuring from the lights to Alpha 2 taxiway, which is 640 feet. And for a Pilatus to be able, and I got 6 out of 6 at 640 feet in the PC-12 with 2.5 hours of fuel and 2 people. Now that's pretty dang light for a Pilatus, but at 5,000 feet, it gave me the comfort that I know, okay, these are some of the strips I can go into Idaho if I have the wing span clearance. But then I had one landing that I missed the Alpha 2 taxiway, and I went an extra 300 feet, and I'm like, and it doesn't matter that I could do 640 feet 6 out of 6 times. That 7th time, I overshot those lights by a little bit and a little bit hot, and now I got to have a whole nother number. You don't get to pick your best landing number or your good day number when you go into the backcountry. As Todd's saying, build your book, be honest about where you were aiming at, not where your tires touch the ground, where you stop. And then when you plan the backcountry, you got to plan your worst case scenario. You got to say, what was the worst I've done when hitting those spots? And then give yourself that as a margin. And I like to add 50%, but that's just me. If I know I can consistently get at this altitude and this weight in my airplane, because it's different weight and tire pressure, I have different numbers. But if I know at this weight, at this density altitude, I can do it Here, I still add 50 feet, so I might push it from 250 feet and add 50%. Now I'm almost, 425 feet.
You know what, Todd, I think the Air Safety Institute, what we're going to do is work to build a template or a sheet that people could build their own book like you're talking about. So I'll get with you offline and we should put winds, temperature, density, altitude, other conditions, and then let people log what their distances are and start building their own book that they can just keep handy in their airplane. I think that's a great idea. We'll take that on an ASI to work with you and build that out.
And I really like what Mark's did. The nice thing about Mark's, super simple. You can do that very simple, and it's quick and it's easy, and I love that. And then, and then this system is just a little more fine tuning. It's fine tuned based on your airplane, your skill level, and yeah. So, and you touched on this yesterday, Richard. There's many right ways to do so many of these things, and I think so many of us can learn from each other, and there's lots of great ways to do things. A lot of people quiet and hang out in the back, and we don't get to hear from them much, but there's a lot of good ideas and ways to do things, and do it safely.
So I think that we hear from point, if you said what's the takeaway theme between Todd and I's kind of input on this, is the importance of measuring your skill set and then adding your margin. Both of our formulas are formulas. I think Todd's is brilliant with the GPS, and now not thinking about density altitude so much. But the important takeaway here is pick a method that you can use consistently, record that data, and then be honest with yourself as you go into the backcountry with real world numbers.
Yeah, and what I liked about yours, Mark, was you 6 out of 6 hit the number you wanted to, but on that 7th you missed, and you said, well, that's my number, because if I'm going to miss in the backcountry, I have to have that amount of distance for a miss. So I think that's being real candid with yourself there. So let's move to this, and then we're going to talk a little more specifics about judging takeoff and landing. But if you had to list the top 5 skills that you would want people to have before they go in the backcountry, these are some of the ones I took down from our previous conversations. But what would they be? So let's just park on these for just a little bit. And we hit on this yesterday. The 3 of us really agreed that this on spot, on speed every time, you've got to be able to fly your airplane on speed. And most of the videos or the troubles that I see in the backcountry are when people come in too fast. I've seen so many videos of people going into Mile High or other places, and it starts with them being too fast on final.
Yep. And you know what? I would agree. And so that on spot, on speed, and I think for so many pilots, they kind of get stuck in that student pilot mentality, and they're afraid of slow flight. Stalls are like the boogeyman that our instructor makes us do, and it makes us sweat because we finish, we're like, oh my gosh, we're sweating. Well, hopefully we don't quit doing those. We need to go back up often, and I've got a lot of time. I still do a lot of slow flight, and I go up, and every one of us should know the full envelope of that airplane. And when I mean take it to the stall, fly it as slow as you can fly it without losing altitude. Don't do it going into the backcountry on your first time. Go up to 7,000, 8,000 feet. Have a margin. If you need an instructor and you're worried about spin recovery and stall recovery, take somebody with you. Make sure you're comfortable, but get that airplane slow. What I noticed, and I'm glad you said that, Richard. If you look at issues and accidents and mishaps on the ground in the backcountry, most of them are due to speed control. People coming in too fast. They're not used to flying just above stall, a little bit behind the power curve, being able to hit their on spot, on speed. And so if I could just, one skill that I think if people could work so much on would be that slow flight. Figure it out. Know exactly where your airplane brakes, know how it's going to brake. Does the left wing drop? Do I get a little buffet? If I'm heavy, do I get a warning? And then, of course, know the recovery, know how to recover with minimal altitude loss. And then the other thing I'd like to have people do, go to that 1 knot over stall speed. Now start doing some bank turns. Can I do a 10-degree bank at 1 mile an hour over stall? Can I do a 20? Can I do a 30? And you're going to find that you can't at some point at 1. You're going to start dropping a wing. But how much better to do it at 7,000 feet than when you're flying a riverbed and you got to make a last 30-degree bank into that gravel bar and you're going too slow, and you know you haven't practiced and learned that, hey, I need a better margin on my speed to do that. And so I think that's so critical, because you got to be comfortable with it. You got to be comfortable getting to the end of that bar or that ridge right above stall speed, so that you can plan it where you need it, on spot, on speed, every time. And I just, if there's one thing I could encourage folks to do, it would be that.
Mark, I've heard you talk about these concepts for a long time. So let us hear you talk about some of the skills you think are so critical.
No, I think Todd hit it on the head. The on spot, on speed, the getting up and doing stall practice. You know, I was talking to we got a lot of Pilatus drivers at our airport. There's quite a few PC-12s on the airport, and I was up there talking to them about, you know, how I was up playing on the stick shaker before doing short field practice. And they're like, you're taking your Pilatus to the stick shaker? I'm like, well, yeah, I'm taking my Pilatus to the stick shaker. Am I supposed to do it short final over the trees the first time? It's like, no, you get out. And if you need to take an instructor with you, go do it. But it's safe at altitude. And if you need an instructor, get an instructor that has the competency, not just an instructor, but the right instructor, and get up there and do it. But the one thing I want to touch on too, on spot, on speed, there's two spots in the backcountry that you have to be on spot, on speed. And I see too often people miss the point. And that's the tree line or the obstacle before the landing spot. So on spot, on tree is, to me, it's the wheels 5 feet or 3 feet above the trees. Oh, here's the tree line and here's your spot. So spot one, you need to be right here on spot, on speed, so you can hit this one spot on speed. What happens is people are so foliage phobic, right? They're so afraid to fly close to trees and close to the ground that they come in on final way up here on speed, but they're not on spot on top of the trees. And so then they dive to hit the spot on the runway. Now their speeds are all blown to crap. So let's not be foliage phobic. Learn to be on the treetops, on speed, and then just continue stable. Like your first landing spot is the trees short final or the bushes short final. Focus there and be on spot, on speed, and then just continue it. And it'll be the easiest landing in the world. The hardest landing in the world is diving after the trees and then trying to arrest a massive descent with an increased airspeed. And it's always an ugly sight. So that's what I've added to that. I think Todd nailed it.
Yeah, go ahead, Todd. I'm sorry, go ahead, Todd.
No, I agree with Mark. So true. And tickle those tires. You can drag those tires through the treetops. It doesn't hurt them, and you don't even feel it. You can see out your side. I mean, most of the time, Mark's flying a pilot, a PC-12, which is pretty dang cool into some amazing places. You know, most of us are flying Huskies and Cubs and different things that are moving a little slower. And tickle those tires, you know, figure out where you are and know where your tires are at. But again, that only happens with lots and lots of practice. But hopefully, you love to fly, and the practice is the burden. If you love to fly, the practice is the fun part. So develop that love and enjoy it and fly like crazy. I mean, it's a lot of fun.
You know, one thing I would add that I don't see on this list is coordinated turns. So when I take people up in practice and, you know, get them used to flying slow, then I'll make them go in and out of the stall in banks like you were talking about, Todd. And I show them the real importance of that is make sure you're coordinated. If you're in coordinated flight, you can go in and out of a stall in a matter of feet, and you'll get very comfortable with being slow. And I'm certainly not suggesting that you go intentionally stall it on short final, but I am suggesting in the backcountry you're going to be slow, and you've got to be comfortable coming in at really slow airspeed behind the power curve. And if you do that too much and you feel a little bit of a shake or a stall there, and all you do is push forward and bump just a little power. So getting used to that coordinated turn, because there's in the backcountry in Idaho and Montana, there's nowhere where you fly a standard pattern. Everything is a little bit different. So you've just got to be comfortable with slow speed and focus on the coordination of those turns.
You know, and I so agree. I think that's so key. Because if a guy's going to get in trouble, it's because he's slow, he's in a bad spot, and then he's not flying the way he's supposed to, and he gets uncoordinated. And what a coordinated turn stalls at and what an uncoordinated turn stalls at are two different numbers. So you get a false sense of security and then don't do it right. You know, and one thing I'd like to throw in here, and you know, a lot of us get a chance to fly the backcountry all the time, and it's amazing. But part of it is the definition. You know, for some of us, maybe we're in the flatlands, and the backcountry for them might be the neighbor's pasture. Treat it the same. It is the same. If you leave the pavement, it's backcountry.
Yeah.
And it may not be Alaska glaciers, but it's backcountry. And if it's a pasture or if it's a slope tail up a nice grass, treat it that way. And I think there's so many different places that can be flown as backcountry, and they'll test us and they'll help us and they'll excite us as to things we can do. Amazing, amazing things we get to do with airplanes.
Yeah, we could talk about this for so long, but I'm going to move us on a little bit. And you have some interesting techniques, Todd, about trying to assess whether or not you can land somewhere. This is a picture of Soldier Bar in Idaho. So would you talk to us a little bit about your techniques for figuring out?
So I love that question, you know, and that's my boys all fly and my daughters fly, and that's a question, you know, can I land there? And again, back to those answers. Well, I think so. And then, you know, we've all heard that. I think so. Well, we better be better than thinking so. We better know so. So, you know, the slow flight is key to determining how long you need to land in your airplane. The practice and the skills build the book. And whether you use Mark's method that's simplistic or mine, either way, you know your number. So, you know, that's the question, can I land there? But perhaps the most critical one is, can I take off once I'm there? Because once we get to a certain skill set, you can land shorter than you can take off. You know, early on, it takes a while for that to catch up. We take longer to land than it takes to get off. But as your skill level progresses, you can land much shorter than you can ever take off. So we start thinking, well, yeah, I can land there, but get to the next question, can I take off there? And so when we talked about that book, and whether you use the Mark's method, it's simple, it's perfect, because do the same thing. Determine what you need to get off the ground safely in different conditions. You know, whether it's a 5 head, sometimes you'll have a one-way strip and you got to take off with a tailwind. You need to know that. How long do I take off? Not book numbers. It says in the manual, well, I want better than the manual. Practice that. Know in your book. You got a paper. We like data, right? I love that. You know, make this a math. This is fun math. I mean, make it that way. Know how much you need to take off. So right off the bat, first consideration, what is the distance of that strip? So not only do we got to know how much do I need to land and take off, we have to be able to assess how long is that gravel bar in the middle of the river right there? How long is it? Well, two methods I like. One is just years of practice. After you do something thousands of times, you get decent at it, but it's not perfect. And so that's one. You practice, 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 practice. The second way, and I like, and it's very easy, for us Cub guys or Husky guys, our airplanes fly very naturally at 60 miles an hour. At 60 miles an hour, you travel 88 seconds a foot. It's pretty easy to put it in 60 miles an hour, 2 notches of flaps, and fly over your landing zone. 1, 2, 3. You know that if I need 500 feet safely plus with my margin, I got to have 5.5 seconds. I mean, there's some simple ways besides that looks about right or that looks long enough to give you some real numbers. To me, I want real numbers. I don't like, well, I think I can. Well, that's kind of vague. Make it real. And you can fly over the thing at 60 miles an hour, count it, no big deal. It's not a rocket science, just make it simple. And it starts building a pattern. It builds ideas of this strip is 1,200 feet long. I need 4. I got great margins. I'm great. This strip is 400 feet long. I need 350. That's not much of a margin. I think I'll pass today until I get a headwind. And that's the other thing to remember is not all strips are made for today. That doesn't mean we don't get to go there. It just means maybe today's not the time for it. So I really think being able to assess the length of a landing zone, whether it's a ridge top, a sloped mountain, sloped ridge, a gravel bar, soldier bar, a true runway, I think it's critical. We got to be able to know those things. How short can I land? How much distance do I need to take off? And how long is that bar? You know, once you land, the mystery's gone. Then all you got to do is get out, walk it off. you know, and that's great. And then you start building that, and it's amazing, you know. And so that is the list, you know.
Todd, you hit on something that I've heard Mark talk about that I think is really critical. You said not today, because just because you got into a strip yesterday doesn't mean that today it's okay to fly into that strip.
Yeah.
Mark, talk to us about that a little bit. I know I've heard you talk about that some.
Well, I actually made a post on that just a few days ago. I was flying out to Nashville, Tennessee, and taking a Cirrus or Pilatus or even my Cubs IFR rated. Into minimums is normally not a big deal. It's not a no-go, but I kind of post online the weather report of the airport I was supposed to land at, and I just put it on Facebook, and I said, you know, IFR minimums isn't necessarily a problem, but sometimes you have to say not today. And I posted that, and it was amazing to see how many people jumped on that and said, good for you, and we need more people to talk about that. It's okay to say not today, and especially in the backcountry. You know, Todd kind of said, you know, people say, oh, I think I can get in there. And I get such anxiety. Like, what do you mean you think? You either know or you don't go. You know or you don't go. It's that simple. And when I first started flying my Cub, there was a lot of strips I'd be like, nope, 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 nope. And then years go by and you get all this time and experience and you're like, I used to be afraid of that. And instead of thinking that's ridiculous that I used to be afraid of such an easy strip, I look at it and go, I'm so glad I was smart enough to be afraid of that, even though now it's 100% of the time go deal kind of a strip. And now I'm looking at different strips. But I want to touch on how important what Todd brought up was. I love the 60-mile-an-hour flyby and count. It's an easy thing to do. It gives you a number that you can't measure with your eyeball. Runways that are skinny look so much different in length than runways that are fat. Put trees on them, put a slope on it. Don't think you're going to guess it. Just do a simple flyby, count out, practice that on your own runway, see how good you are at it. It's such a valuable exercise. But yes, no, you can't go. There's a strip that we looked at a lot of times, not a strip, an off airport landing. It's a difference, right? That we looked at, and we did flybys on quite a few times that we never landed. And it was almost a year and a half before we're like, you know what, we got a little bit of a wind, it's coming up the hill. You know, if we have to throw it off the cliff on the other side, the wind is smooth and calm and an uplift when we chuck it off the cliff. And it was all this time not going. And then one day we had 5 of us land on this ridiculous little spot, and not one had to chuck it off the cliff, which would have also been safe. But then the next time we went up there, only one person went in. And that's fine. The thing that scares me to death is I want to give an example, and I think this kills people, and don't be tempted to say things like this to pilots in the backcountry. We were sitting around at Johnson's Creek, and someone was there that had their 185. It's a great airplane and very capable, and had a P-Ponk conversion, bigger engine and prop and the tires, and stripped out real light, wonderful airplane. And they said, can I get into such and such a strip? And immediately on the other side of the campfire, someone says, absolutely, I see 185s get in there all the time. And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. He didn't ask, can 185s get into such and such a strip? He asked, can he get into such and such a strip? And none of us can answer that question for him. He might be a better pilot than the 185 drivers that have gotten in there, but we don't know that. And don't put that pressure on people to live up to their aircraft. You know, Todd's flying a Husky, I'm flying a Carbon Cub, and people say, oh, a Husky can do this, or a Carbon Cub can do that, and absolutely, you're flying this brand of airplane, you can get in there easy. It's like, nah, the plane. And the biggest thing I could drive home from this whole thing is know your limits, you know, and know your aircraft limits, know where those two limits reside together, and never exceed either one.
Yeah, and the only way to find that out is what you guys talked about at the very beginning, was to go out and do the practice, which I think is a lot of fun. You know, when I first got my Super Cub, I was at X level of performance, but then after a while, you realize this airplane can do so much more, and you just begin chipping away at it and getting better and better and better. And I found that to be just a lot of fun to do. So, no, you know, the only way to find out your capability compared to your airplanes is to do that work, keep that book, do the practice Mark's talking about, or whatever. We are running short on time, so I want to hit this one real quick. Todd, was there anything left on the can I take off question that we need to address?
You know, not really. I mean, we kind of skimmed over those. So many considerations to you know, to consider as you're picking a spot, and you know, is there room? What's your departure? And the approach is the same. Build yourself a checklist. Build yourself a checklist. Wins. Is the approach clear? Do I clear an obstacle like Mark was talking about? Do I have to come in over tall trees? All the things you need to analyze. At some point, you do that automatically. It becomes part of just what you do with every takeoff and every landing. And I think that's so true. And Mark's point, I think, is so critical. And it goes both ways. You know, when we put pressure on someone, oh yeah, 185 can do that. That may be true. But as a pilot, never be sucked into someone else landed there in a Cub. Well, that doesn't mean you can. And don't feel that pressure. You know, be careful. The primary objective, and I think this is a true takeaway from what we should be talking about. Primary objective of every outing is to return home safely. Everything else is secondary. If you didn't land one cool spot, you still fulfilled your primary objective. Maybe you made good choices. You didn't fight wind. You didn't land somewhere you shouldn't have. You fulfilled your primary objective. Everything else is secondary. To go fishing, to go hunting, to go hiking, to land that cool spot. Don't forget priorities. We want to come home safe. We want to bring our airplane safe home to the hangar tonight, and all is well for tomorrow. We can continue to practice and learn and have fun. And I just think it's so critical. Remember that, and yeah, can't overstate that.
Yeah, really, really good point. So let's take a few minutes to talk about some of our funnest places to fly, and then hopefully we'll have a little bit of time to answer some questions. So I'll start. This is one of my favorite new finds, is Bentonville, Arkansas, and the Fly Oz networks of strips. This is my favorite picture of me and my Super Cub. That's at a place called Banks Ranch, and I think this is Jake's Ridge. Banks Ranch is this really cool place where it's got 4 different strips within this one area, and we were landing Jake's Ridge here. But Bentonville, Arkansas, and the Fly Oz network, that's just a fantastic place to fly. And unfortunately, it's not a secret anymore. People are beginning to find out about it, which is good for them, but just great airstrips around there. What about you, Todd? You got a strip to talk about?
So Alaska for me is my playground. If you ever get a chance to come to Alaska, if you can fly the coast from Seattle up, unbelievable. The landings from Seattle to Ketchikan are minimal, but once you leave Ketchikan, the tide flats, the beaches, unbelievable all the way up. If you come inland, you're going to come through Whitehorse, and that's cool too, but the beach is cool. Like to come the ocean, come through Cordova. But for Alaska, favorite playgrounds, Connect River. Everyone who's here knows it. It's a giant playground of gravel bars and water and glaciers, and it's endless fun. And there's 1,000-foot bars that are smooth as a runway, and there's 20-foot bars that are smooth as a runway, and it's a hoot. You can practice for your water assisted. You can do anything you want there, and it's just a hoot. So Connect River, top of the list for pilot playgrounds. Prince William Sound, which is a great body of water to our east of Anchorage, Wasilla. Endless beaches, endless. You're on the ocean, and it is spectacular, spectacular. You got Denali Park, lots of places there. And if you come in March, bring your skis, and you will have absolute time of your life. There's nothing funner than ski flying on the glaciers in March. So come. And you know, I could go on and on. There's an endless list, endless list.
How about you, Mark? What are some of your favorite spots?
You know what? I think I'm a little bit spoiled. I live in Utah, so I'm surrounded by the beautiful Rocky Mountains. We've got the deserts that we go play in, and we can go land on a mountaintop in the snow on the same day. Go land on a sand dune or a river bar. We're close to Idaho. But I was kind of thinking a lot about this. What's my favorite place? And it made me think what was one of the most memorable times flying. And it was the most inconsequential, unnameable piece of nothing in the middle of the desert. It was one of my best memories. And what it came down to for me was just being with my friends. it wasn't really a place, it was the people I took with me. And that place you have in your heart for the people you're out playing and flying with. And so I love Alaska, like what Todd says. I think it's probably the neatest place I've ever been up to, up there playing on the Nick and landing on all those bars. But the best place you can fly into in backcountry aviation is anywhere with your friends. And you can just sit under the wing in a desert with nothing to look at, have a sandwich and a Diet Coke, and just absolutely soak it in.
Yeah, I agree. John, let's see if we have time for any questions. Do we have any questions in the queue? Or
we have a lot of questions.
well, I'll tell you what, we'll try. We won't get to them all tonight, but we'll try to respond to them, and I'll reach out to Todd and Mark if they're specific for them and ask and get their help.
And I promise I can be long-winded. I will try to limit any responses to one sentence.
All right, well, we're gonna, let's see here. So good question from John, not me, but another John. What is the right final approach speed for a short field? Less than 1.3 VSO, right? But how slow? 1.15 VSO?
Could you guys hear that okay?
Yeah, this is a pilot skill set question, because I don't even want to say what my final approach speed that I'm comfortable with in my Cub. And the reality is I've got enough time in my Cub that I can hear it, I can feel it, I can sense it in the stick before the stalls. I can barely relax the stick even a fraction and avoid the stall or bump the throttle and back out. The best way I could answer this is we had a bunch of backcountry, kind of extreme backcountry pilots, and someone asked, what's your approach speed? And I started off by saying, I have no idea. I've got to know my airplane enough that I'm not looking at my indicated airspeed short final. And a few people are like, what, really? And then every single backcountry pilot said, I don't know either, I don't know either. My airspeed indicator says 0, or my airspeed indicator bouncing all over. And so the goal is to get to where you know your airplane enough that it doesn't really matter. But I would say start out at your standard, what your POH tells you is approach speed, and then work slower from there. And of course, if there's the higher the wind gust, the bigger the margin. If it's dead calm, cold, icy, freezing, stall air day where you breathe and the air stays right in front of you and then falls to the ground, you might get a lot closer. That was not a one sentence answer.
All right, so I'm going to take the other side of that, Mark, and I agree with you. 100% agree with you. And the word that you were describing is you start to wear your airplane. You wear it. You wear it like a tight pair of pants. They're always tight in my case, but that's another story. So the point is you wear it, you know it, you feel it. But for the question for John, who asked the question, if you're flying a Cub, you're flying a Husky, you're flying something small, if you'll add 10, you're going to be safe. So if you're stalling at 40, make your pattern at 60, final go to 50, and then when you get close to the ground, start bleeding the speed off. So add 10 for short final, add 20 for the rest of the pattern. That's a safe way to go. But what Mark said is exactly right. Know your airplane and do those things. But that comes with time and it comes with practice. So in my Cub, short final, or touchdown, stall speed is 35. My short final is 45. And then as I get really close, I get really slow.
But I think that's worth reinforcing, Todd, is you're talking about adding 10 miles per hour above your actual stall speed in your actual conditions. So in my Super Cub, I find the same thing. If I'm glancing at my airspeed, which I usually don't, it's below 40, and that's where my airspeed indicator stops. It doesn't have any reading below 40 miles an hour, and I'm on short final below 40. So I think that's the important thing is practice it in the front country first and know exactly where you're comfortable, and use the miles per hour that Todd suggested as a guide to start with based on your actual stall speed in the actual conditions you're flying in. Okay, what's next, John?
Okay, this is a good one. Earlier, you guys answered what the backcountry is, and that's any place that's not an airport. The question is, how do you identify where you can and cannot land off airport? And Jared is actually concerned about land use and ownership issues.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's a long answer, and I'm not sure there is a.
You can land. No, I'm kidding.
So I know, Mark, you've done quite a bit of landing, off field, like places that aren't charted and so forth in Utah. How do you guys decide where you can and can't land? What guidelines do you have?
You know, there's an app, and I'm so sorry I can't think of it right now. I do so much of my flying, like most of us in my Cub or helicopter, so close to home because they don't go far fast, that for the last 20 years, we've kind of learned where we can and can't go, and we know. But I know Corey Robin has an app that he has on his phone. I'm so sorry, I don't know what it is, but we'll be in the air and we'll key up the mic like, hey, Corey, open that app of yours and tell us if we can land right here. And he'll open an app and he's like, oh, looks like that's BLM and here's the rules that this BLM has given us, and we go from there. So he's got an app that says who owns, and we've found some great spots that you would never thought were privately owned that we would then land later at a home airport and look up the owner and then reach out and talk to them. And we've been able to get permission to land on private land in the middle of absolutely nowhere. So I'm sorry, I don't know the name of that app, but I'm sure we can reach out to Corey Robb and tell us what.
A good point you're making is you got to do some homework. It's not necessarily easy to find out where you can and can't land, and the land rules can differ based on if it's BLM land or National Forest Service or the different government agencies. So there's a bunch of great sites that have information out there that can help you figure that out. So that's where I would suggest it's not an easy answer.
The only thing I would add to that very quickly is if you do see people on the ground, they don't know what you're doing. They don't know that you're landing. They don't know if you're wrecking. And if somebody's fishing or doing something, find another spot. Yeah. As pilots, we got to protect each other and we got to protect our reputation. We can pick somewhere else to land. They're on ground. They can't pick somewhere else to fish. So we just be conscientious, move around, go somewhere else, and make it easy for everybody else, so we don't get rules and legislation passed on us that kill us.
Yeah, John, let's take one more and then we'll close. Go to the closing.
Okay, really quickly, Brian came in and said it's 1X is the app, so or OnX. I'm not sure exactly how that, but
that's correct. It's OnX.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about them, so I can't state one way or the other. I would just say, I just go back to reiterate, it's not an easy answer whether or not you can land there. So do your homework, go to the different agencies that have information that can help you out.
I tell you, the best advice I can give you is get really familiar with mark that spot button on your GPS, because we're always like, oh, I'll go find it when we land. When you go land, you can never zoom around and find it. You're looking at breadcrumbs going, what was it again? And a lot of times lands are so close to each other. Just fly over it. You hit the button, mark it on your GPS, and you say, not today. And then you go do your research and find out if you can do it next time.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, let's just close, and I want to close with a couple comments that Todd, you started to hit on it, just the be kind, be courteous comments that, a little bit of courtesy goes a long way when you're in the backcountry flying. So recognizing that, it takes a lot to keep these places open. And so we want to be kind to the people we see out there, and just a little bit of that goes a long way. And let me just pass that to you guys. Mark, anything on this topic?
No, I really appreciate that. I think the biggest thing when it comes into the backcountry, in aviation, there's 1,000 ways to do it wrong and at least 10 ways to do it right. In the backcountry, deviating from the normal pattern is almost the necessity, right, to safely navigate the backcountry. And so you're always doing things a little bit different. And what I've learned is that in the backcountry, you get opinions passed from one pilot to another that are opinions, they're not laws. And when those opinions start to butt heads, we just need to learn to be kind and respect that there's at least 10 right ways to do things in the backcountry. Some will say never more than 5 airplanes in the backcountry, and some will say never more than 1 airplane at a time and spread 20 minutes apart. And I had one interesting example. It was an unfortunate little argument, but a friend of ours hit a deer landing in the backcountry and totaled his airplane. And now he's he has anxiety about crashing his airplane. Every time short final, he is convinced that an animal's going to come out and try to kill him. So when he comes into the backcountry, he does a pass. If no one else has landed first, he does a pass to let the animals know something loud and scary is here, and they move away, and then he lands, and for him, that makes him feel safe. Another pilot made the argument that to fly slowly down the runway, make a noise with your engine is unnecessary hogwash, and a hiker might be angry and hate pilots forever because you flew down the runway. Well, I can see both sides of this, right? I can see I don't want to hit a deer. I saw the video of him killing that deer and his crashed airplane, and I thought, wow, I'm going to fly down a runway, push the animals back, and then I see other people go, well, you didn't need to. So this isn't a debate on that subject. The point is, as we have these discussions on both sides, understand there's at least 10 right ways to do it, and be kind as we find the right ways overall that lets everybody enjoy the backcountry.
Yeah, aviation is really a small community, so the more that we can work together, see where we have common interests and focus on that, it'll be better for all of us. Todd, what are your thoughts on this topic?
Agreed. You know, so often, if you're a hunter, you're competing for a resource. If you fish, you compete for a resource. In aviation, we got open air, and that's why one of the reasons pilots are accepting, they're nice, and they want to be in a group is because it doesn't hurt us to be in a group, and it's wonderful. You can share knowledge, you can share stories and skills, and enjoy it. I mean, you can come and have a picnic, and pilots will come. You're not going to do that if you're hunting, because people are going to steal your spot. And fishing, they're going to catch your fish. But pilots, we have a unique opportunity to embrace, and I think that's so good. Embrace, be kind, invite others to come flying with us. Show them, you know, you have neighbors that don't like noise, take them flying. You know, do those things that go the extra mile and set us apart as a group of people that's conscientious and smart and is good for the area. So it goes a long way. It's just like you both said.
Good stuff. Well, so here's where we are in closing. Preparation breeds performance. So we talked about making sure your airplane's ready and you're ready with the right survival gear to have on. And we talked about resources to go find more information. Practice, practice, practice. I hope you heard that a lot. Whoever you were at the front end of this webinar, the experienced people or the non-experienced, a lot of backcountry or not, we're all coming out of a winter. We're not where we were when we left at the end of summer with our backcountry skills being at their best. So start a little more slowly and get yourself up to speed before you go back to the tougher strips. And find the fun places to fly and go fly with some buddies. It's an awful lot of fun. You can get Wings credit on this seminar this way, and we'll talk through these and we'll have these posted if you want to get your webinar badge. There's the credit there. I want to thank Aviat again for being such a great partner for us and for anybody really who flies in the backcountry. Todd and Mark, both really busy people. I can't thank you enough for joining us. Some great stuff tonight. Thanks so much.
For those who may have any questions, my Instagram's AK Husky Rep. Feel free to message me. Anything I can do to help, I'm open and I'm free. So
great. AK Husky Rep. Is that what you said?
AK Husky Rep. Yep. I'm
great.
the best way to message me. Easy to find.
Awesome.
And I'm Mark Patey, and of course you can harass Mike Patey as well. And it's Mark Patey or Mike Patey on almost all the social medias. We have that unusual last name, so if it's a Patey, they're probably directly connected and also a pilot. So
good stuff. And I'm at Spad McSpadden on Instagram, and we also have an Air Safety Institute Facebook page and AOPA Instagram as well. Thanks so much for joining in. Mark, Todd, thanks a bunch. You guys fly safe. I'll see you in the backcountry.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Richard.